right now. Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Good evening, everyone. Bob Pompeani greeting you from the Fan Cave, and thank you for joining us here on KDKA Plus and Sports Radio 93.7 The Fan. A lot to get into today. Bob Pompeani joined by Chris Mueller up at 93.7 The Fan PM team. And Chris, if you didn't know any better, you would have thought the Penguins season was a continuation of last season the way it happened tonight. Thoroughly outplayed. The game was over after one period. 6-0 your final. To me, it wasn't even that close. Odd man breaks, too many of them. Their third line outworked the Penguins' third line. Power play stunk, and they gave up a shorthanded goal. Your thoughts?
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? I'll tell you something first, Bob. I'm going to take everyone behind the camera here. I'm staring at a blank screen. Normally, I can see you on my end and see myself. But it's kind of an appropriate start to the show. I can just look at the camera and talk, and I know I'm in good shape. But flying blind appeared to be what the Penguins were doing this entire game. Tristan Jarry flying blind. He might as well have had his eyes closed. I thought their defense was wretched ahead of him and in front of him. He certainly didn't help himself, though. Many of those goals were shots that could have been stopped by a better goalie, like, I don't know, Igor Shesterkin on the other end,
for that
where the
matter,
Penguins did
Jonathan
have
Quick.
some chances. Sure. Well, I mean, Shesterkin, I thought, did something very important in this game. I thought the Penguins played better than the Rangers for maybe the first 6 to 10 minutes, something like that. But he held the fort. He didn't let anything junky slip by him. He didn't give the Penguins any life. And then the Rangers took over. And so you want a big picture thought from me on this, or sort of a sweeping takeaway. It's this. For so many years, the Penguins were the team that would outskate their opponents. They were younger, they were faster, they were better, they were more skilled. But for several years now, all of those things have ceased to be true. They still have high-end skill, but it's aging. They haven't replenished their depth. The Rangers are a fast, skilled, better skating team. The Penguins cannot try to skate with them like they did tonight, or they will get routinely humiliated by the better teams in the NHL, both conferences. I mean, that's just a fact. It doesn't have to stop
there. You could put the Devils, the Hurricanes, you can put the Panthers, you can put a lot of teams in that same mold. So they play tomorrow in Detroit. Quick turnaround. I don't know what that's going to look like, but Detroit is another team that can skate pretty well. So the Penguins got their hands full. Let's talk about the Steelers real quick, because we found out today that Aiden O'Connell was going to be the quarterback for the Raiders. They got a lot of messes up there, too, not the least of which is Devontae Adams, who it looks like he's close to returning, but again, looks like he's not going to play. He wants to be traded, so they got issues. What about the Steelers' issues, especially when we talk about George Pickens?
Pickens is the flashpoint right now, and I think it's for a couple of reasons. His behavior, his attitude, his body language, the fact that he won't talk to reporters, that his teammates have to answer for him, Bob, I think it connects back to the fact that they have major problems with their offense. And if this guy's not feeling like he's prominently involved, then you're going to have a real issue. And their offense doesn't seem to be geared to get him prominently involved. So it's one of those circular things, right? The player's going to be frustrated because he's not getting the ball enough. The ball is not going to come to him because he's lollygagging on some of these routes. And also the head coach, who ties all of this together in an ugly little bow, thought he could get through to the immature but talented player, said, I'm the guy that's going to get the most out of him, but is also the guy philosophically at the top of the mountain here who I think wants this offense to be more conservative, more risk-averse, take fewer big shots, just as a kind of modus operandi. And I think that feeds into Pickens' frustrations here. So you've got kind of an intractable problem if you're the Steelers, unless Mike Tomlin is suddenly willing to dramatically change the way this team approaches offense.
Yeah, we have a lot to get into that way. We'll talk more about that coming up. Also like the hoodie there, Chris. Very, very attractive there with the logo on it. It's funny, when I wear that around town, some people think it's a marijuana endorsement, and it's not. They don't understand where that logo comes from. But it means you're a serious golfer, and I like it. We got to take a break. We'll come back with more. Want to hear from you at 412-575-2600. We are live tonight on KDKA Plus, as well as 93.7 The Fan. It's the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. All right, our tweet of the night from Jen Bolano Ridgely, Penguins PR. Fun fact, throughout Pittsburgh sports history, only Sidney Crosby, Willie Stargell have spent 2 decades with a team in this city. Pretty good company there. And Crosby Minimal tonight, only 2 shots on goal. Same with Malk, and most of the shots on goal for them came from Jesse Pugliarvi, from Michael Bunting, and others. So they need a lot of change, it looks like, based on. I know it's one game, so Chris, I'm not going to just. It's one game. However, for a team that has 7 of the next 9 on the road, for a team that knows it missed the playoffs, last year by a couple of points. The year before that, it went to the final game before they lost at home to Chicago. These starts are important, and they do matter at the end of the year.
I mean, when you're talking about a team that they're going to measure themselves against, like the Rangers, a real honest-to-God Stanley Cup contender, you absolutely can extrapolate real conclusions here or draw, real insights from how this game played out. And my chief one would be they are just going to have to figure out against the faster, more youthful teams in the league how to play a different style, because the way that they were accustomed to winning hockey games or getting into those like 7-5 shootouts on occasion that they were so comfortable with 5, 6, 7 years ago, it's not going to work like that anymore. I mean, Sidney Crosby's not much younger than me. And I know how I feel when I roll out of bed in the morning, Bob. They are just, as a franchise, as a team, they're not going to be able to play the way that they used to play and expect the same results.
Correct. We have some tweets. Frank Alicio on Twitter at KDPump, at Chris Mueller PGH. He says, same guys expecting different results. It's not going to happen. And then I Will Stalk You on Twitter says, Sully and the Penguins, remember how we kicked everybody's butt in 16 and 17? That was us. It'll be forever us. Father Time chirps in and says, why do you guys try to ignore me? I'm here, Father Time. So it is a part of it. They have to get more youth, and they haven't gotten any. Hope a guy like Rutger McGroarty and others can come up through the system. We will see. Back to the lines we go at 412-575-2600. We'll begin with Mike in Blairsville. Hey, Mike, how are you?
How you doing, Bob? Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Hey, the thing about Pickens and the rest of the team where they're making all the mistakes and the miscues and everything, back when Chuck Noll coached, that was unheard of, and whenever Bill Cowher coached, that was unheard of. They didn't make.
No, it wasn't.
No,
it wasn't. Come on, man. In the late 80s, when Chuck Noll didn't have all the great players anymore, they were not that good. Bill Cowher's teams routinely botched some of the same stuff Mike Tomlin's teams do. It's a different era now. Guys have social media. Guys are way more demonstrative. But this revisionist history that Bill Cowher never blew a game because of bad game management or had players commit undisciplined penalties, or that Chuck Noll was like an unblemished saint whose teams always did the right thing. I tire of that. I saw the Cowher era. I saw the end of the very tail end of the Chuck Noll era. These are some of the same problems that have afflicted the Steelers and football teams for a very long time. Doesn't excuse any of them, and Mike Tomlin should bear the brunt of the blame, but the idea that this is new or unique, I think, is ridiculous.
And this is also not to excuse some of the decisions Mike has made, because coaches make them everywhere. If you watch the end of the Buffalo game the other night, they had overtime secure. All they had to do is possess the ball. Instead, from his own end zone, Josh Allen's trying to throw the ball down the field, and I don't know what in the world they were thinking there, but that's a coaching malfunction. There's a lot of it goes on in the league. But to your earlier point, playing conservatively, yeah, you can win some games, but you're always going to be in low scoring, it seems, tight games, and that means mistakes, one here, one there. I want to see a game where they win 35-6, and it's not even close. We haven't had one of those in a long time. Back to the lines we go. Chris, we got Michael in Beaver Falls. Hey, Michael. Michael, don't listen to your...
Hi, Chris. How y'all doing tonight?
All right, what's up?
Calling from Joe Namath Country, Beaver Falls. Steelers will win.
Okay, thank you. It's a very good comment. Let's go to David in Finlandville.
He said that last time, and they lost. He's a liar, Bob. He's lying to us.
David, you're in Finlandville, and now you're on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Hey, Bob.
Hi.
Thanks for taking my call. I want yours and Chris' opinion on who the Steelers might get for a receiver just to fit their system. I'll hang up and listen to you.
Well, I mean, they need somebody who can come in there and be a good complement to free up George Pickens a little bit, so that he doesn't just, lollygag all over the field at times, what he does. And there are guys out there to do it. I know the big names always get the attractive, attention here, Chris, but there are other guys, and I'm sure at this point, Omar Khan has to be looking at this, because going into this season, two things happened that I thought are really going to play a role here. Number one, not having a complement to George Pickens, and number two, waiting for Cam Sutton week 8 when you have Beanie Bishop, who is untested, playing that slot corner, and he has had ups and downs and more downs than ups.
Well, on the receiver front, here's a name to watch, Christian Kirk with Jacksonville. The price I still think is pretty high given the contract he signed, but he's somebody to look at because they're still 1-4 and might not get up off the deck. You know, Darius Slayton's a name I bandied about numerous times, but don't look now, Bob. The Giants might actually be kind of decent. They went in and beat the Seahawks on the road. Slayton had a huge game. They might not be sellers. You know, I look back at the draft, too. They took Roman Wilson. They have Brandon Johnson come up from the practice squad. He doesn't play one snap of special teams. Mark Caballi noticed that. That was like one of the reasons they gave for why Wilson was staying down. What are we doing here? How is he in the doghouse? Guys like Jalen McMillan. Well, here's like a guy like Jalen McMillan still on the draft board when they pick Roman Wilson, who looks like a slot guy in the NFL. Jalen McMillan walked in and was basically a wide receiver 2 type of player. Like, I have some questions now with the fact that they won't play Roman Wilson about some of the other players they could have taken but apparently didn't think were the right fit.
And as far as Roman Wilson, he's been healthy in his practice now fully for the last 2 weeks. And I have no idea, given their state of wide receivers, why so far he hasn't had a chance. I would expect that to change this week. We will see. Let's go to Mark in Shadyside, joins us right now on the Sports Call. Hey, Mark.
Hey, guys. I'm just wondering about this paradox about why Sidney Crosby is so supportive of Sullivan as a coach when he's really ultimately destroying the end of his career.
Well,
I mean, that's a good call.
It is, but it's also, you know, his career, he still had a pretty good year last year. You know, I don't know how much, I know he has say, I know he has a lot of say, but, you know, I think it goes beyond him too. This line configuration bothered me tonight. With Anthony Beauvillier and Drew O'Connor, I think Sidney has a lot of say in who's up there. Anthony Beauvillier, Chris, even though I love the name, I think he was with 3 teams last year. He didn't score a lot of goals, and he's 27, still young enough, I suppose, but they're putting like a reclamation project on the top line. He's fast. I'm sure Sid likes that, but that's not the kind of line I envision for week or day 1 of this season.
There have been very few guys who have like big goal scoring talent. Gensel was obviously the noteworthy one, who have been able to successfully play alongside Crosby because they see the game and think the game the way he does. He's long had these attribute type of players as his wingers, and that largely works out. But I still think the point the caller made there is kind of interesting. You've got a ton of support, vocal support, from the best player to the head coach. And that might be because Sidney Crosby still believes in Sullivan, and Sidney Crosby still having really good numbers, you know, right through last year. And I still think he's going to be great this year because he's Sidney Crosby. But, man, at some point, if Mike Sullivan is trying to get through to these guys or change things and it's not taking, or worse yet, he's not really trying to change anything, you can't just go by, hey, my captain really likes this guy, we've got to keep him around. You have to make a change. But here's the other problem, Bob, and you know this. Fenway Sports Group likes the guy too.
Yeah, and Dubas said he'll be as long as he wants to be here. That's not a comment you normally hear from a general manager, and all due respect for Mike Sullivan. He's won twice here, he's done a lot of good stuff, but there is an expiration on some coaches at some point. You know, I also look at, you know, they're trying, again, I went back to this last year, Chris, they're trying to walk this line that prevents them from rebuilding, but also keeps the guys who need help. They need somebody from their system to come up, not unlike what they had in 16 and 17. Now, they don't have those players, or more specifically, Mike Sullivan is not interested in playing those players as he once was.
In 16 and 17, there were guys that he had coached in the minors, and so he was a lot more comfortable with those players. Now it's not, that dynamic doesn't really exist, and I think he's just loath to go to whatever young players at times. Like St. Ivany, took him a while, right? It took some of those defensemen who were clearly, you know, Shea, better options. It took them a while to gain his trust when it probably should have taken less time. It just, you say he's done a lot, he's won 2 cups. All of that is true. I obviously, like everybody else, enjoyed watching them go back to back, but it's hockey. Every single one of these coaches has an expiration date, and if they don't start doing something different to play to the roster that they have and not the roster they wish they were, it's going to get ugly fast for him.
Bill, Chuck, Dan, we'll get to your calls hopefully when we come back. You're watching the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call right here, 7 nights a week, KDKA Plus, and on most nights, 93.7 The Fan. Ken Rice is at the anchor desk tonight. It's been a busy night, especially with Hurricane Milton down there in Florida, Ken.
Yeah, Bob, that storm wreaking havoc right now in Florida. We have the latest live, plus pastors in the Mon Valley coming together to combat hate, and a runaway sheep return to its home. All coming up at 11, Bob. See you in a few.
All right, Ken, thank you. Bill in Plumboro, you're now on the sports call. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, hi, Bob. Hey, Chris, I want to address to you, you talked about Chuck Noll in your latter years. If Chuck Noll was still the coach here, he would be cut. This wide receiver.
Okay, I think he met George Pickens. He wouldn't deal with him.
I don't know. Again, the idea, Chuck Noll's an all-time great, but the idea that every single player who played for him was a team-first choir boy who never did anything wrong and that the effort was always there at a maximum on the field, I think is sometimes overstated. And I could go into detail here, but we only have like a minute left, so I'm not going to. I will spare people all the traditional stories people have told about that era's Steelers.
All right, Penn State, Pitt, both 5-0. In the last 4 years, Penn State has started that way every year, but then the second half of the year, not so good at 13-11. Pitt, on the other hand, we haven't seen this in quite a while, and they have a chance to do something at 6-0 that they haven't done since, I think, the 1980s. What will happen? Will they both win?
I think they will. I'm going to say that Pitt will manage to find a way to handle prosperity. Now, it's always tough when you're playing a traditional ACC rival like Cal. You throw away the record books when those two coastal foes get together. But Pitt has something that they've had every time under Pat Narduzzi, that they've been good. A guy playing quarterback at a high level. Nate Peterman was in 2016, Kenny Pickett, of course, in 2021. Holstein might be the best of the bunch. He is a true difference maker and a force multiplier, Bob.
He is. And I'll tell you something, if you compare his freshman stats with Kenny Pickett, total difference there. Chris, thanks very much. We appreciate it, and thank you for watching. We'll do it again tomorrow night, 10:35. Have a good night. We'll see you then.